December 11th, 2023, and this is episode 26 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Joe Meade. Tonight, Joe and I will go over some of the rumblings in the college football world. There's not a lot, and then a couple different things in basketball, from Juwan Howard to the non-conference action, and then to the conference play that wraps up this little two-game slate as we head back to all non-conference. So, Joe, we're going to let you take over football here. There's not a lot, but there are a couple things that deserve to be talked about.
Oh, my bad, Sean. I lost you for a second.
Yeah.
Just want to ask that again?
Yeah, so we're just going to go to football first, Joe, and got a couple things that we need to talk about, but not much, so why don't we get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it. So, funny, the internet actually went out for me. I think I hit on a pretty major story just as we went live here. Ohio State former quarterback Kyle McCord now, him and Julian Fleming have been semi-linked to Nebraska. I won't even go out on a limb and say that they're visiting, but Nebraska just received a flip prediction from a bunch of their insiders for Dylan Raiola, the number one quarterback in the class of 2024. Obviously, huge news there because you kind of go from a really good starting QB in McCord to potentially getting the guy they've always wanted. I mean, that's been a guy since even Scott Frost was at Nebraska, Raiola, where they've been begging for him. I mean, obviously with the uncle and the father having played at Nebraska, the uncle being in their Ring of Honor, this could be a huge deal. And, he's been committed to Georgia for a while, originally committed to Ohio State, committed to Georgia. And this would be quite the steal for Nebraska if they do manage to pull this off. I don't know whether they plan on getting both, maybe having McCord play a year and having Raiola learn behind him. But if I'm Kyle McCord, this probably affects my recruitment a little bit because, he's definitely had a lot of reasons to transfer from Ohio State. I think part of it was he was having guys like Lincoln Keenholz, Devin Brown, and Aaron Nolan in the class of 24 on his coattails. Dylan Raiola would be right up there. I mean, I think he's one of those guys where, luckily for Texas, this never happened. But the moment Quinn Ewers at the beginning of the year, if he did something bad, luckily he didn't, I bet you a lot of money they would have been chanting for Arch Manning. And perhaps if McCord went to Nebraska, it could become a situation like that. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. This just broke as we went live here, so definitely don't want to harp on it too much. Getting off that, Michigan State had some pretty good news. I mean, Aaron Childs is visiting. It's likely he will go there. For those who don't know, that's the backup quarterback from Oregon State who showed a lot of promise in some games. It's actually the number one transfer portal quarterback on some sites, so take that as you will. Bad news is they're losing Malik Carshot, probably one of their top playmakers at tight end. There is a rumor he is seriously looking at Michigan, which would almost be the unthinkable. I mean, only one person has done that in recent time, and that was Ben Van Sumeren of the Philadelphia Eagles. But, and admittedly, and we know Ben personally, he didn't have as big a role on Michigan as Malik Carr did on Michigan State. I mean, he was probably one of their top playmakers over the past few years. So if this happens, Sean, I mean, hey, Malik Carr, he's not well liked by a lot of the Spartan fan base. I think this could definitely switch. And the reason is Jeremiah Beasley, I don't know if it's actual brother, stepbrother, but very good. I'll just say very good relative, very close relative. That's how I describe it, is committed to Michigan. So I think it's something to keep an eye on regardless, no matter where he goes. Bad news for the Spartans. Other than that, Sean, I mean, we talked about the Diaz news last week. I think Penn State's going to look to promote Anthony Poindexter internally. Not that that's too big an issue because the defense was clicking, but, we will see how that all folds out. But, it's only December 11th, Sean. There will be so much more portal news coming out. And, I mean, there's so many rumors probably in the queue right now just getting ready to be sent out. So let's get into some basketball.
Yeah, we've got... portal's really the only thing we got in college football right now. The first Big Ten bowl game is December 23rd, and that's Utah Northwestern. We'll definitely dedicate some time to previewing all the bowl games, but still a week plus away until then. So, Joe, we're going to turn the page to basketball. before we get into the individual games, we've got a interesting story coming out of Michigan. Juwan Howard is apparently had another altercation with another employee, one of the strength coaches, and there are a ton of rumors flying around about what actually happened. Juwan was on the bench of Michigan's victory versus Iowa yesterday, but bring the viewers up to speed on what's happening here, and I'm sure some of the rumors that we've seen aren't true, but you know what I like to say, usually when there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, Sean, I think I'll just start off with the facts. The facts are, if you look at, this was actually pointed out by a few members of MGO blog. Of course, message boards are the most reliable thing on earth, but it did point out some unequivocal facts. The first was Jawad during the game. He was there in his assistant coach role, which he's been doing since the Battle for Atlantis. Then you had no coach John Sanderson. So John Sanderson, he was a holdover for the Beeline staff, famous for the Camp Sanderson that developed kind of skinny white dudes like me and Sean played with, like Nick Stauskas and like Mo Wagner. It's just monsters. I mean, among others, Trey Burke, Karis LeVert, even had some NBA guys come back to work with Sanderson. So a very well-recognized strength coach. He was not there Sunday. He's usually at every game, including every road game. Rumor is that he may have went up after Jace for being late to a meeting. I don't know why. And I think Juwan and him got into some kind of altercation. I do not want to say it was physical. I think if it was, Juwan is under a zero-tolerance policy stemming from the Wisconsin incident in February 2022. So I think that's pretty safe to rule out. I bet something did happen. Probably some loud voices, some kind of split. But that doesn't necessarily stop the rumor mill at all, Sean. And, with Juwan, he had a very serious open heart surgery. Jalen Rose quick to dispel that anything crazy is happening. But, definitely not the kind of noise Michigan wants. But I will warn, and this isn't probably even biased, this isn't so much a Mel Tucker situation if Juwan were to be let go or resign or whatever. Because Phil Martelli's really been the head coach most of the season. I mean, in fact, since really early September, late August when Juwan had the surgery. So I don't think this would affect Michigan way too much. I think, ramifications-wise, big picture, it could be a much bigger storyline. But for now, I don't think it's anything too crazy based on what I know and based on those interpretation of the facts. I won't say I'm 100% right, but based on all the Michigan insiders that I know like to jump the gun versus report as the facts come in, I kind of like that blanket story I told. But Shaw, what do you think?
I just think that the likelihood of Juwan Howard being Michigan's head coach next year goes down a little bit. Whether this is, a little dust up or gotten to the levels that we've seen Juwan get to before. But if you watch a Michigan game on TV or in person, Juwan is there, and he is not really a part of the huddle. He might be talking to one player individually, but the players who are in the game in timeouts are looking at Martelli. And, Juwan is there probably just because his title is the assistant coach right now, and that will flip eventually, we think. But I don't think this will change much, even if he wasn't there. But I do think that, with his health and another kind of incident here, I do think it's likely that he does step down at the end of the season. But at this point, we can only really guess. If Jace does, Jace is a junior, right? So
Senior, actually.
So if Jace does decide to move on, I could definitely see Juwan also doing the same. And I'll have a question for you later, Joe, about another coach with a son who's a senior potentially moving on at the end of the year. But it's just weird that this came out after a win because Michigan, looked pretty good against Iowa. And I'm not sure this is really dampening the great mood from that victory, but got to talk about it because something definitely did happen. And that's about all that we can guarantee right now. So, Joe, bunch of games Saturday. These were most of the non-conference games, so we'll go to those first. Saturday was a great day for college basketball in general, between, CBS having a couple games and basically from noon to midnight, there was a couple good games on at the same time. They definitely did that on purpose with college football, other than Army-Navy being off. But we're going to start with the game that tipped first. That was at noon. Illinois goes into Tennessee, puts together a real good effort. They just come on the wrong end. Marcus Domask, after, looking like a first-round NBA draft pick at MSG, does struggle mightily, but I left this game pretty impressed with Illinois. Domask goes 2 for 11, and they hang with a team that is really good on the road.
Yeah, Sean, I don't know if so much as fatigue caught up to Illinois. I think that could be the easy way out. I mean, if you want to talk about the ramifications of this, because I am really the consequence guy on this show, really nothing, as we said, would happen to Illinois. I mean, in most ratings, most metrics, they are still the top 20. Actually, some, they've even risen their status after this. So I think if you're Illinois, you just take the victory as is. I don't think any reasonable Illinois fan would have expected them to, win at the rack, beat a top 10 FAU team, and go into Knoxville and win. So nothing much to say. I think if you're Illinois, you just gear up for your upcoming schedule. I think Colgate could be a sneaky game on the 17th. They are pretty good. Then they have the rivalry game with Missouri. And it kind of sneaks up on them, Sean. They do play Fairleigh Dickinson. I do think Fairleigh Dickinson's a lot different than last year. I mean, they are under sub 250 in most rating systems. And then they're home to Northwestern. So my message to Illinois is probably just stay consistent. And, that's the main issue they've ran into the past 2 years. So I think that they're really addressing that right now. And maybe just one more challenge for them. Maybe just get even more efficient off the bench. Having more scorers besides Shannon and Domesk. I promise you that won't be a bad thing down the stretch.
Yeah, I come away with 2 things from this game from Illinois. This was a MLB-type road trip from Illinois. And I mean that because, Major League Baseball teams will go on the road for like 2 weeks and play 4 series on the other coast or something like that. You don't really see that in any other sport. NFL teams typically do come back to home base before, even if there's 2 away games in a row, unless there's, a Thursday or something. I know the Giants did that this year when they went to Arizona and then San Francisco on a Thursday. But you don't really have that in any other sports. But Illinois did not go back between Rutgers, FAU, and now Tennessee. So you have three efforts against good teams away from home, and you're able to pick 2 of them off and really compete in the third one. I think you can be. They did go up in the rankings this week, Joe, from 20 to 16. So I think that shows how, well, this would have been really, really nice. It's definitely not bad at all that you lost. And remember when we talked about it when Tennessee played Purdue? Tennessee got whistled for every foul. They didn't really in this one. They had a favorable whistle at home, and that will happen when you're on the road. But neutral court, I think Illinois is the better team. And it's just how it goes sometimes. Next game, Joe, we're going to go north of the border. Alabama and Purdue. The Boilers win 92-86. Alabama lit it up from downtown, 19 threes. Purdue only attempted 18. But the Boilers still finish on top. Great game from Braden Smith, 27. And then business as usual for Zach Edey with 35. But Alabama put on a good offensive effort and it still was not enough to beat the Boilers.
John, I have a general question. I've been dying to hear your take on this. Purdue always, when they're forecasted the tournament, I think everyone picks the team that can shoot a lot of threes. It's just the well-shooting teams. And Nate Oates' style of basketball is probably right up there with the poster candidate to take down Purdue in the tournament. Alabama, you mentioned they made 19 threes. It was 19 to 46, so still 41.3%, which is really good. But if I'm a Purdue fan, would you be nervous that this kind of basketball you don't really have the greatest response to? Because this was really close the entire game. And frankly, Bama makes a few more shots down the stretch. I think this goes the other way. What do you think?
I mean, you're going to be nervous regardless of what style the 14, 15, or 16 seed plays in the first round. I mean, it could be Fairleigh Dickinson, by many measures, was the worst defensive team in the country last year. 360 out of 362. It doesn't matter. And anything will make them nervous. And once they get past that, hopefully they will as a conference, they'll be fine. But I think it was a good game plan from Nate Oates and Alabama. They said we have to win a shootout because Alabama does not play defense, and Purdue still won, which is, tells me that Purdue wins this game almost every time because Bama kind of went how they wanted, and they still didn't win. Shows a lot from Purdue. Braden Smith, had the huge game alongside Edie. Fletcher Lawyer had one of those earlier. They just got a lot of good players, Purdue. They only have really one great player every day, but they seem to be, Painter can mix and match who's got it on that day, which I don't really think they could do that in the past. But no, I don't think that this worries me from Purdue. I think it actually excites me if you're a Purdue fan because this game did not go how you thought it would and you still won. So the next game, Joe, unfortunately for my Indiana Hoosiers, get run out of the floor by Auburn. It's 104-76. Indiana was leading 22-10 at the under 12 timeout. After that, it was about as bad as it can get. Auburn did have a spectacular day. I've watched them a couple times, and they have not put together that performance yet. Auburn played fast. They played 12 guys. They got up and down, and they really outmuscled Indiana. That's not something that you can usually say about the Hoosiers. But what was your take on this one?
Yeah, I just wish I saw this version of Indiana against Michigan last Tuesday. I think each team is due for one kind of non-conference blowout. I mean, we've seen it happen to everyone in this conference, except maybe Purdue, perhaps at Ohio State. But other than that, everyone's pretty much gotten their tails handed to them at one point or another. So I really just chalk it up to that, Sean. I think you were just thoroughly outmatched and outclassed from the first whistle. So. And frankly, I'm not going to say Indiana quit, but you could kind of tell they're getting discouraged. And how could you not? I mean, Auburn was just dunk after dunk, response after response. Every time it felt like Indiana got a tag closer, it was just blown open even more. So I don't think if you're a Hoosier fan, there's too much to worry about. What do you say, Sean?
I'm leaning towards writing it off as a fluke because Auburn really did play spectacularly. Like that needs to be said. If they had not lost on the road at Appalachian State, who's a top 100 team in Ken Palm, they'd be in the top 25 pretty easily right now because they play really tough defense. They probably do foul you every possession, but Indiana shied away from the fight instead of realizing that okay, you could probably get away with a little more than you can usually. They shied away from it, and Auburn's guards had a day. I mean, they made a bunch of tough shots, and they had a lot of easy ones, too. This game does not grade out that poorly analytically for IU, because Auburn was already in the top 20 in Ken Palm, so I think this took them down 8 or 10 spots, which is not a lot this early in the year. But you get a week to prepare for Kansas. You better show something, because was not really a straight away game, but it was very heavily favored towards Auburn in the crowd. And just disappointed because you're supposed to be able to hang with these teams. Even the first 2 years of Woodson, Indiana wasn't the best, but they rarely got blown out. I can only remember a couple off the top of my head. But Kansas also has a week off after their win against Missouri, so we'll see how that game goes. We'll preview that on Thursday. I tend to think that Indiana will at least show up. And that might mean a loss because Kansas is really good. But Indiana also hasn't been at home since Maryland. So you get a little bit of a spirited defensive effort, one that you didn't get here, and maybe you can pull something off. But you got 2 more non-conference games on Saturday, Joe. The next one, Wisconsin goes to Arizona, the definite number 1 team in the country. They hang for about the first quarter of the game, but after that, Arizona proved too much. I still do think Wisconsin are pretty good. This is just a really, really good Arizona team that can score it and defend. And, they do head up to Indy to play Purdue next week, but I don't think you can be too harsh on Wisconsin after this one.
Not at all, and it's very similar vibes to Illinois. Kind of, it's been a recurring theme on our last few episodes, Sean. I mean, I think this was the most house money game any Big Ten team has had the entire year. And consider it like the free bet you have on an app or a free bet you had at a casino. It didn't go your way. You went for the home run. Didn't happen. Oh well. Even a bad example because I don't want to encourage gambling too much, but Sean, I think Wisconsin, they'll just chalk it up to, a learning experience and they will suffer zero, and I mean zero consequence from this game. So I think going forward that they'll take the win at Michigan State. And maybe if you ask a Badger fan, maybe I'm going too far here. I think they would pick winning at the Breslin and beating their in-state rival Marquette over a win in Arizona. I think without question they would take that. So
Yeah, this game was over before the 8-minute media timeout. Wisconsin's not a team that's engineered to come back. We've said that a couple times. But, I mean, it was Arizona's day at home, and they're already the best team in the country. Doesn't look great to lose by 25, but if there's anybody that can do it, I think it's to Arizona. Like I said earlier, they've got a great game next Saturday, which is another great slate of college hoops. Get to that on Thursday. Last non-conference game of Saturday, Joe, was the Garden State Showcase at the Prudential Center. And Rutgers pulls off a non-conference win. The away team has won this game a couple years in a row. Cliff Amori had a double-double. Noah Fernandez had 19. Impressive victory for Rutgers on the road.
yeah, I also want to highlight Michael Davis, the freshman, had 11 points, 2 of 3 from three, and Rutgers. I want to give them a lot of credit too, but I also kind of question how good Seton Hall is.
Not very.
I don't think they're very good, but in terms of Rutgers, maybe this gets you something going. I think it was a really rough week, losing to Illinois and Wake Forest. So just breaking this against a team that this was a fired up arena, Sean. This is a big game in New Jersey, and to come out after two clunkers because they weren't even close in their last two games, to show up like this is really good. The next three games, sandwiched in between, there is a game against Mississippi State. I think that could be a really big game for Rutgers Saturday the 23rd. I think that, if they win that after winning 4 straight, assuming they take care of business in their other games, they go to Ohio State Wednesday, January 3rd. Maybe that'll be a remixed version of Rutgers. We'll see. I'm not going to overreact after one win the same way I wasn't going to overreact when they lost to Princeton. But patterns are still a thing, Sean. I think their bench really needs to step it up. And frankly, I don't think they're going to shoot like that from the three very consistently. So they got to figure something else out.
Yeah, these next 3 games, like you said, Joe, are you play a 1-7 Long Island and a 1-10 Stonehill. You've got to kill them. Get the numbers up. Because you took a bit of a hit with your 2 lopsided losses to Illinois and Wake. But, score and get your defensive numbers up and use Mississippi State's a decent team, but they can win at home. On a Saturday crowd at noon, they can win that game. So, good for Rutgers. Got to take care of business in these next 3 to get your numbers in a spot where you can attack the Big Ten and not have to win a bunch of games. Because did see them get a double bye in the Big Ten tournament and not make the big dance before. Can't happen again. Not that they will get to that 4th spot, but they do need that Mississippi State game. That is all the non-conference action, I believe, other than some bye games. Minnesota and Northwestern take care of business. Wildcats are in the top 25 this week. As a side note, we're going to turn the page to conference play here, Joe. We have got one conference game on Saturday. Penn State beats Ohio State. We talked about these away teams getting wins. Ohio State looked like they had this one in the bag, up 18 in the second half, but the Nittany Lions come back and steal one.
Yeah, I think even came back is too soft a term. They stormed back. I mean, my gosh. Even trailing 12 at the half. I mean, winning the second half by 15 in and of itself is impressive. But I want to highlight the bench. DeMarco Dunn, the former North Carolina. I frankly half remember he's on Penn State, scoring 16 points, 7 for 11 from the field. And then, admittedly, I've never heard of Leo Boyle, but I mean, now I have because he played Lafayette. Ultimately, I don't watch a lot of Lafayette. I know Lehigh's their big rival. from Scranton, Pennsylvania. So good for him, man. 15 and 16 off the bench, 33 total bench points. And Kanye Clary, man, 19 points. Ace Baldwin hasn't even had to play out of his mind, and he really didn't. Only 9 points, 3 assists, 5 assists, pardon me. Uh, really good for Penn State, but after giving them their due, I'm just more puzzled by more than anything from Ohio State. They're 11 from 26 from three, which is really solid. Um, I think they're getting good contribution. I like the what they do with Key and Akparash, switching them off. I think a lot of their guys have gotten better. I just think the carryover issues from last year continue to plague them. Defense, leaving guys wide open from three. It's been a theme we've seen with Michigan, but Ohio State, I think they've had a really good start to the season. I do think this could be a setback, but I'm cautious to say that because their upcoming schedule, Sean, they play UCLA on Saturday, um, and New Orleans, and then West Virginia and a neutral. I'm going to say if they win two of those three, I'd still feel pretty good about the start to the season. If you're a Buckeye, I think that win over Alabama is going to do wonders for them later on, should they continue to go on track. And I think this is a missed opportunity. I don't want to be too optimistic for them, but I think they were due for a bad loss at some point. This was it, and I think Holtman on Saturday. I'll go out on a limb and say I'd be shocked if they didn't have a very good game against UCLA. I'm not going to say they're going to win, but I think they'll compete for most of that game. And frankly, it wouldn't shock me at all if they win. I'm actually expecting them to win, I should say.
Yeah, you would think that if they get this one and then they should beat West Virginia and they should beat UCLA. They're better than both those teams. You could have had one loss going into the new year, but a little bit of a missed opportunity. I do think I've been a little impressed with Penn State. I know they lost to Bucknell. I know they lost to Maryland, but you got some guys who are carved out roles for that team. I do think they're going to win a couple more games than people think. They are better than Minnesota. And they might finish 13th, but they might get 6 or 7 wins, which is more than pretty much anyone thought. Move the calendar to Sunday. We've got Michigan taking Iowa down at Carver Hawkeye Arena, 90-80. Michigan gets a pretty good effort from their starting lineup, all 5 of them in double figures. You get average game from Doug McDaniel, 4 of 12 from the field, and you still take care of the Hawkeyes. You think this is more of a good performance for Michigan, or does Iowa kind of really stink?
I think Iowa just stunk shooting the ball. I think at one point they were 1 of 14. They made a bunch of threes at the end, so they finished with a 5 of 20 from three, but that was not indicative of all how that game went. It felt like every three Iowa made, that crowd would get off their feet and get onto their feet, and they would just miss every time. I mean, I think it was pretty awful, to be honest, from Iowa. 90-80 doesn't really show how dominant Michigan was. The first half was back and forth. Michigan led by 2, but by the under 16 mark, you kind of saw the wheels falling off for Iowa. They fell down 10. Then they're just getting frustration after frustration. Under 12, Michigan was up 16. And then, you got classic Brand McCaffrey. And of all the ejections he's had, this one, I don't think it's up there, but it's still entertaining nonetheless. Even his less entertaining reactions are worth watching, I'd say, if you're really bored at work or really got 10 minutes to kill. For Michigan, I think this might be their biggest win of the year, Sean. I think this team really could have got into a tailspin after 3 straight losses, especially after the way they lost to Oregon, Indiana. Just awful, awful down the stretch. They still haven't proven to me that they can win close games, so that's certainly not going to be ignored. But for Michigan, we're going to talk about this, Sean. I think they kind of have a good opportunity to, the 2023 portion of their schedule. They have 2 quad 1 wins as it stands right now. They face Eastern Michigan, who, again, has one guy who averages in the 20s. No one else is even close to double digits. That game in Charlotte against Florida next Tuesday, that could be another potential quad 1 win. And then McNeese State, who is very good, top 50 team and most rating sites. If they could win 3 of those games, maybe even 2, I wouldn't hate that start to the season as a Michigan fan. especially if they win all three, then I would really like that start to the season. And with Long Beach State beating USC, that definitely won't be a quad four loss as of now. So I think if you compare it to last year, they are in a much better position, which is really weird to say for a 5-5 team. But I'm going to stop now. Sean, what do you think?
I think you gotta turn the year at 8-5, and then you can start thinking about a real chance of being in the tournament. Florida's not a great team, but it's a real good opportunity for a win. Like, it won't kill you if you lose, but it also, will be a missed opportunity. Florida's okay. They're probably on the outside looking in right now too. But, you put it on Eastern Michigan, get your numbers up a little bit, and then, Florida on a neutral should be quad one. The McNeese State top 50 offense. If you win that game by double digits, that'll look good too. So, you got at least a shot if you're Michigan now. You don't go under 500 like your neighbors to the west. And, good enough. I don't know if any of your on-the-court issues were solved in this one, because Iowa is worse at the things that Michigan are bad at. But at the end of the day, you do turn it around for a W. The last game on Sunday, Joe, was Michigan State and Nebraska at the Pinnacle Bank Arena in Lincoln. And the Huskers take the W 77-70. They're now 8-2 on the season. They do kind of get embarrassed in both of their big games this year, but they come back with a win against the Spartans. Michigan State now 4-5. We were talking about this before we went on, Joe. I do think Nebraska actually looked okay. They moved the ball well. Rink Mast is a unicorn of a player. There is really nobody like him. And you get some threes to go down, and as we know, Michigan State isn't very good at anything, and you pick up the W.
Sean, the only thing I'd push back on is I think in the first half, Nebraska, there's a sequence they made three 3-pointers in a row from Tominaga, Jawan Gary. They were like way beyond the arc, and like two of them were end of shot clock off the backboard. I thought that was simply luck. And admittedly, when MSU was up 3 at the half, I said, well, there's no way Nebraska's going to even come close to the way they played offensively. And I know they turned the ball over a lot, Nebraska. But the second half, man, after the under 16 timeout, I know Michigan State at the end with Tyson Walker, and we have to always credit Tyson Walker. He is a gamer at the end of games. Every time there's going to be a big shot taken for Michigan State, the entire arena knows it's going to him, and he usually sinks them. So, but after that, Sean, the 16-minute mark, you just felt like Michigan State was behind the 8 ball, even at times when they would tie it up or get it within 2 again. And, Nebraska had no problem coming back. It was weird. It kind of felt like what Nebraska did to Michigan State in the second half is what I expected Michigan State to do to Nebraska, if that made sense.
Yeah.
Because that's what's plagued the Huskers so much in the early season in the past is they've just, let momentum go all the way against them, and then they've just absolutely folded. And Michigan State, they tied the game up. I was like, I think everyone watching that game, Sean, especially you, it's like, all right, the tide's going to turn now. Michigan State's going to take over, go out to a 6-point lead. Walker's going to hit him with a dagger, and then that'll be all she wrote. But that just never happened. And I don't know, Sean. Do the Spartans have to worry about not making the tournament? Answer that after you give me your take on this game.
That was going to be my question to you, Joe, but Nebraska just got better quality shots. Like, that's really what it came down to. Michigan State, we've talked about how they can't make threes all year. They're 8 of 17, 47% in this one. That was not the issue. The issue is that they weren't getting as good of shots as Nebraska. Even Tyson Walker made a couple tough ones, but at the end of the day, come out of there with a loss, 4-5 overall, 0-2 in the Big Ten. I was going to ask you, Joe, what do you put the percentage chance of Michigan going to the big dance right now?
Michigan State, you mean?
Michigan State, yeah.
Yeah. I really need to see them beat Baylor because they are lucky that's considered a neutral game. It's at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. That's not a neutral game. Every Michigan State fan would even admit that. That place will be 95% Michigan State. I've never been a Baylor alum in the state of Michigan. I certainly could be wrong, but maybe the 5%'s not even Baylor fans. It might just be the smart aleck Michigan fans cheering for Baylor. Regardless, Sean, I think a lot of it could hinge on that game. If you go 4-6, I assume that their next three games are against, some subpar teams. Even though Oakland isn't bad, Michigan State will still beat them. If they could start 4-6, they're leaving 2023 7-6, assuming they win all the games they should, which is against Stony Brook, Indiana State, Oakland. Again, I'm not even going to go out on that far a limb. This team hasn't allowed me to give them the benefit of the doubt. If they're 7-6 with no quad one wins, Sean, their chances are around 50, which I would not have even thought would be the chances come January for this team.
Yeah,
What do you
because
think?
when it comes down to it, Joe, you got to beat Baylor because Purdue is really the only win that moves the needle in the conference right now. Maybe in Illinois, maybe a Wisconsin, but can't be going to the committee at 18-14 with a Wisconsin win. You just can't. And that's a good Big Ten season. So if you go into the conference season, I know you're already 0-2. Are they going to get 10 wins in the Big Ten out of 18 more opportunities? Definitely.
It's tough too, Sean, because they're at Northwestern, at Illinois, at Wisconsin, go to Michigan. And really, they end the season at Purdue and at Indiana. Those could be 6 losses right there, assuming all the home games go their way, which you never know.
Two already haven't this year. So
Yeah,
I think it's definitely under 50. Now I think that the coin does flip to over 50 if you do get Baylor, but Michigan State's got to reinvent the wheel here, which is obviously really tough. I think they have to lean into just being dogs defensively and getting out in transition because they do not really have a half court offense other than Tyson Walker shaking and baking, which works sometimes. But I'll ask you this, Joe, before we move on.
hmm
And while I do think the record would be the same, where would Michigan State be without Tyson Walker right now?
I think they would be in severe trouble because the only reason I give them remote chances, nah, I don't want to say remote, I give them reasonable chances against Baylor and all these other teams is because of his just playmaking ability. That guy's a gamer. That guy, I think in the entire conference, and I mean this, and I'm considering Zach Edey and Boo Booey, he's the guy I want taking the last shot. He's proven it time and time in his really 3-year prime at Michigan State, and not even going to compare him to some legends that have played at Michigan State in recent time. But Sean, he is the most important player on the team, but he really could be the most important player in their program since Cassius left because he's probably kept them afloat a few times, especially in 2022 and last year when they made it to the Sweet 16 with the big shots. So I think that's unfair to put that all on him. But he's responded like a true gamer does. So I do tip my cap to him. I'm serious.
The good thing about Baylor, for Michigan State's point of view, is that they're run by their guards. So obviously Hogard hasn't been great, but he can defend a little bit, and Akins and Fears, and I mean, you can win that game with good play from your guards, but you got to bring it defensively because Baylor can score it probably as good as anyone in the country. I pulled up their numbers here. They are third offensively with 1.2 points per possession adjusted. They haven't played any great teams yet. Their only quad one game is a Florida team on a neutral, which they won by 4. And other than that, they've played Seton Hall, Oregon State, Auburn, a couple wins on neutral. While this is also categorized as an N on the run sheet, this is going to be the toughest atmosphere they've faced, and they also have Duke at the Garden after. So they are looking to punch their ticket basically into a top 4 protected seed here before Christmas. But Michigan State, you got a chance to turn around the season right here. And if you don't come ready to play, Baylor's going to kill you because they can score. But
Absolutely. Sean, before we end here, do you want to go quickly through the teams that are, besides the obvious like Purdue and Illinois, probably even Wisconsin, the world, What if you on a scale 1 to 10 likelihood to make the tournament as of December 11th?
Yeah, let's rapid fire it.
Yep.
No explanation, just a
Yep.
number. We'll
All
start.
right.
We'll start with the team that's at the top of the Big Ten. That's the Indiana Hoosiers. Joe, what are the chances they make the tournament?
6.5.
Yeah, I was gonna say 6. Same thing as Michigan State. A lot hinges on Kansas this weekend. If you can pull that off, you're already 2 wins in the conference. There's a real chance. Northwestern.
8.
Yeah, I was gonna say 9. They just win close games, and they've already got Purdue. It's a big win. All right, Illinois 10 for both of us.
10.
Wisconsin
10.
10. Maryland 5-4 overall.
4.
Yeah, it was 3 for me. All right, Penn
Really?
State 5-5, 1 for me.
3, maybe.
Ohio State 8-2.
6.
Yeah, I had 6.5. So
Mhm.
Minnesota 7-3, 1 for me.
2.
I do think they are going to finish last. We will do a conference reset of every conference, not just this one on Sports Daily College Basketball, where we'll re-rank the teams over the dead period, kind of right before, right after Christmas. Spoiler alert: Minnesota's going to be last for me. Purdue at 9-1, 10. Nebraska at 8-2.
I go 4.5, maybe.
Yeah, I've got 4. All right, Michigan at 5-5. Got the same thing. 4.
5-5. Oh, really? 5 for me. I think it could hinge a lot on that Florida game, Sean.
Rutgers at 6-3. I'm going to go with 3.
I'm gonna go 4. Yeah.
Just they might pick off a couple, but just doesn't seem repeatable over 20 games. Iowa at 5-5.
4 if their offense picks it up.
Yeah, I got 2.5 because their offense can lose them games, which what didn't happen before. And then last but not least, Joe, we've got the Michigan State Spartans at 4-5.
Coin flip, and then after Baylor, I'll give you a great answer.
Yep, 5 for me too. So that's all we have for you today on the In a Nutshell podcast. Be sure to check out social media, subscribe, like, do all that. Joe and I will be back later in the week, and then Kumar and I will be on Sports Daily College Basketball either tomorrow or Wednesday, and we'll catch you up with all the action over the weekend. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.